The rhythmic clatter and distant whistle were Leo's constant companions. He sat on the sun-baked earth, a skinny silhouette against the vast prairie sky, watching the steel giants thunder past. Every few hours, a new train would appear, a roaring beast of iron and steam, pulling its long chain of cars towards an unseen horizon. For Leo, these trains were more than just machines. They were messengers from a world he only glimpsed, a world of bustling cities and endless possibilities. He imagined himself aboard, wind whipping through his hair, leaving behind the dusty emptiness that had been his home for as long as he could remember. His parents were a fading memory, two faces obscured by time and grief. The small, ramshackle shack, barely more than stacked lumber, offered little comfort. His only solace came from these passing behemoths, each one a fleeting promise of something different. He traced their routes on an imaginary map in his mind, wondering about the faces behind the windows, the cargo in the wagons, the stories they carried. A profound loneliness often settled upon him as the last car vanished, leaving only the smell of coal smoke and the vibrating ground. Yet even that loneliness was tempered by a strange sense of belonging. The tracks were his river, and the trains, his only friends. One sweltering afternoon, as a particularly long freight train rumbled past, Leo noticed a man looking out from an open freight car. The man wasn't just staring. He was seeing Leo. His face, framed by a wide-brimmed straw hat, was kind, etched with lines that spoke of both hardship and patience. He didn't wave, didn't shout, just held Leo's gaze for a prolonged moment before the car rolled past, taking him out of sight. It was a silent acknowledgement, a flicker of connection across the divide of the tracks, and it ignited a spark in Leo's quiet heart. He didn't know why, but that fleeting encounter felt different from all the others. The man's eyes held a warmth, an understanding that Leo hadn't seen in a very long time. He watched the caboose disappear, a strange sense of anticipation stirring within him. He didn't know who the man was, or why he had looked at him that way, but for the first time in ages, Leo felt a stir of hope, a whisper that his life by the tracks might not be as endless or as solitary as he had come to believe. The sun began to slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, but Leo remained. The image of the man's kind eyes burned into his memory. He knew, with a certainty that surprised him, that he would see him again. The trains always came back, and perhaps this time they would bring more than just a fleeting glimpse of another life. The chilling tendrils of the pre-dawn fog snaked through the derelict shacks, painting the world in shades of gray. Leo, huddled deeper into the threadbare blanket, watched his breath plume in the frigid air. The distant rumble of a train, a familiar lullaby, offered little comfort this morning. He was alone again, the gnawing emptiness in his stomach a constant companion. A shadow fell across his meager shelter. Leo flinched, instinctively shrinking back. He braced himself for the usual shove or harsh word, but instead, a soft voice cut through the silence. "Good morning, young one." Leo peered out cautiously. A man stood there, his face etched with kind lines, a gentle smile playing on his lips. He was older, with a wispy beard and eyes that held a quiet wisdom. He wore practical, worn clothing, but there was an air of dignity about him. "My name is Chen," the man continued, his voice as warm as the first rays of the sun. "I saw you yesterday, by the tracks. You seemed lost." Leo didn't speak, his throat tight with a mixture of fear and a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time, curiosity. He looked at Mr. Chen's outstretched hand, calloused but inviting. It wasn't an aggressive gesture, not a demand, but an offer. Mr. Chen didn't press. He simply waited, his patience a tangible presence in the cold air. "You look hungry, boy," he said, his smile softening further. "And cold. There's warmth and food where I'm going, and perhaps a place for you." The words were a balm to Leo's weary soul, a place, The concept was almost foreign. He hesitated, his small world defined by solitude and scarcity. But the sincerity in Mr. Chen's eyes, the quiet strength emanating from him, chipped away at Leo's ingrained caution. He looked at the hand again, then at the man's gentle face. It was a leap of faith, a desperate hope against all odds. With a silent resolve, Leo reached out, his small, chapped hand finding purchase in Mr. Chen's firm, warm grip. A wave of relief, unexpected and profound, washed over him. Mr. Chen squeezed his hand reassuringly, a silent promise. "Good," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. "Now, let's go." They walked in comfortable silence, Mr. Chen's stride steady and unhurried. The fog began to lift, revealing the stark landscape. In the distance, a scattering of lights flickered against the pre-dawn sky, a beacon in the encroaching gloom. The air thrummed with a different kind of energy now, the soft sounds of awakening life replacing the silence. Leo, still holding Mr. Chen's hand, felt a strange lightness in his chest. The lights grew brighter with every step, and with them, a nascent hope began to bloom in Leo's heart. He didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't facing it alone. The smoke rose in 100 wisps, blurring the late afternoon sun into a hazy orange disk. Leo paused at the edge of the sprawling encampment, a boy dwarfed by the sheer scale of humanity before him. Tents, patched and faded, stretched, as far as he could see, a canvas city sprung from the raw earth. Fires crackled, their warmth a stark contrast to the biting mountain air, and around them, figures moved with an energy that felt both frenetic and rhythmic. Shouts and laughter, sharp commands and melodic chatter, wove into a tapestry of sound unlike anything he'd ever known. It wasn't just English, or even the smattering of Native American dialects he'd picked up. This was new, a cascade of unfamiliar tones that made his head swim. Mr. Chen, his gentle hand a steadying weight on Leo's shoulder, gestured towards a cluster of larger tents. "Home, for now," he said, his voice a low rumble. Leo nodded, his gaze sweeping over the faces that turned to watch their approach. Most were Chinese, their eyes dark and curious, their clothes practical and worn. A few, however, were not, their presence adding another layer to the camp's vibrant, confusing tapestry. He felt a sudden, acute pang of loneliness, an orphan adrift in a sea of strangers. His stomach rumbled, a stark reminder of the long journey and the emptiness within him. They reached a communal fire where a stout woman, her face a web of kindly wrinkles, stirred a steaming pot. She looked up, her smile widening as she saw Mr. Chen, then landed on Leo, her gaze assessing but warm. "Ah, Mr. Chen, and who is this little sparrow?" she asked, her voice a robust contralto, the words tumbling out in a mix of Chinese and heavily accented English. Mr. Chen introduced him, and Leo managed a small, awkward bow, his cheeks flushing. The woman, Auntie Mei, ladled a generous portion of thick, savory soup into a wooden bowl, its aroma instantly soothing. She thrust it into his hands, her fingers calloused but surprisingly gentle. "Eat, little one. You look like a gust of wind could carry you away." Leo took a hesitant sip. The broth was rich with vegetables and tender meat, a warmth spreading through him that felt like more than just food. It was a comfort he hadn't realized he was craving. Auntie Mei watched him, her eyes twinkling, before turning back to her pot, humming a lively tune that seemed to banish some of the camp's overwhelming noise. For the first time since arriving, surrounded by the clamor of 100 tongues, Leo felt a flicker of belonging. The rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack of sledgehammers on iron spikes had become the soundtrack to Leo's days. From the edge of the camp, a safe distance from the flying earth and splintering wood, he watched the men work. Their movements, initially a chaotic blur, slowly resolved into a synchronized dance. Picks rose and fell, carving trenches from the stubborn earth, Shovels scraped, then arced, flinging soil into growing mounds. The air vibrated with effort, a humid mix of sweat, dust, and the metallic tang of newly laid rail. Big Guo was a whirlwind of energy. His broad shoulders glistened under the sun as he hefted sections of timber, his booming laugh echoing even over the din. He often led the work songs, his voice a gravelly rumble that the others picked up. Leo found himself humming along, memorizing the call and response patterns, the way the tempo surged with a particularly heavy lift or softened during a shared drink of water. He noticed Mr. Chen, his face etched with concentration, meticulously aligning each rail section, his hands moving with the precision of a craftsman. Auntie Mei, though usually in the cook tent, would sometimes emerge, a bucket of cool water swinging from her arm, offering a moment's respite and a sharp, witty remark that would send a ripple of chuckles through the weary crew. One sweltering afternoon, a hammer, slipped from a worker's grasp, skittered across the rocky ground, coming to rest near Leo's feet. For a moment he froze, a familiar shyness gripping him. Then, a glance from Big Guo, not impatient, but questioning, propelled him forward. He bent, his small fingers closing around the cool, heavy handle, and carried it back, extending it wordlessly. Big Guo's grin was immediate and wide. "Ah, little helper! Good hands, good eyes." From then on, the small tasks became more frequent. Fetching a forgotten wrench, carrying a jug of water, even sorting the smaller spikes from the larger ones. Each contribution, no matter how minor, was met with a nod, a kind word, or a pat on the head from Mr. Chen. Leo began to understand that the camp wasn't just a collection of individuals, but a living, breathing entity, each person a vital organ. He learned to anticipate needs, to move without being asked, to become another small, steady beat in the camp's tireless rhythm. The hammering and digging, once just noise, now sounded like the pulse of something alive, and for the first time in a long time, Leo felt himself beating with it. The rhythmic clang of hammers on steel, the gritty scrape of shovels against rock, these were the songs of the mountain that crisp autumn morning. Leo, small for his 12 years, hauled another bucket of gravel, his breath misting in the cool air. He found his rhythm, a steady contribution to the growing line of track that snaked ever higher. Big Guo, sweat glistening on his broad forehead, boomed a cheerful greeting, his laughter echoing off the pines as he heaved the heavy sleeper into place. Auntie Mei, from her makeshift kitchen tent, whistled a lively tune, the scent of simmering pork and ginger already wafting through the camp. Mr. Chen, a quiet smile on his face, meticulously inspected a newly laid section, his gaze sharp and reassuring. The air hummed with purposeful energy, a collective pride in each new foot of progress. Then, the sky began to scowl. A low, insistent rumble, like a distant beast, vibrated through the earth. The wind, previously a gentle caress, sharpened into an angry lash, whipping dust into swirling miniature cyclones. The pines, moments ago standing sentinel, now swayed and groaned, their branches flailing. A cold, heavy drop splattered on Leo's cheek, then another and another until a deluge erupted from the bruised heavens. Rain, thick and relentless, hammered down, turning the meticulously cleared ground into a slick, treacherous bog. Thunder cracked directly overhead, a deafening explosion that sent a jolt through Leo's small frame. Auntie Mei's whistling ceased abruptly, replaced by sharp commands for everyone to seek shelter. The camp, usually a hive of activity, dissolved into a frantic scramble for cover, the roaring wind tearing at tent ropes and canvas. The storm raged for what felt like an eternity, but was perhaps only an hour. When it finally subsided, leaving behind a dripping, silent world, a nervous quiet settled over the camp. Mr. Chen, his face etched with worry, led a small group, including Leo, to inspect the newly laid track. The path was a quagmire of mud and displaced stones. As they rounded a bend, a collective gasp escaped their lips. Where a proud section of rail had been just hours before, There was now a gaping chasm. The sheer force of the water had carved away the embankment, dragging sleepers, ties, and rails down into the raging river below. The meticulously built track, their triumph, had vanished, leaving behind only a raw, ugly scar on the mountainside. Big Guo stared, his usual boisterous energy replaced by a stunned silence. Auntie Mei, arriving a moment later, wrung her hands, her usual fortitude momentarily shaken. The mountain, they realized, had shown its fury, and their hard-won progress had been swept away in a single brutal act. The morning air, crisp and biting, carried the clang of metal on stone. After the deluge, the tracks lay buried under a fresh landslide of earth and rock, a jagged scar across the landscape. Men, their faces grim but determined, gathered at the camp's edge, surveying the damage. Big Guo, his broad shoulders already dusted with fine red grit, hefted a shovel twice the size of Leo. "Right then, lads," he boomed, his voice cutting through the quiet despair. "Let's get this cleared. Many hands make light work, eh?" Auntie Mei bustled amongst them, a basket laden with steamed buns and sweet tea. "Eat up, boys. You'll need your strength. And don't you dare try to skip breakfast, Big Guo. I'm watching you." Her laughter, rich and warm, brought a flicker of cheer to the somber scene. Mr. Chen, ever the steady anchor, pointed to a particularly large boulder. "We'll need the lever for that one. Big Guo, you and I can manage the fulcrum." Leo, small and easily overlooked, watched from the periphery, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. He wanted to help, to be a part of this collective effort. But what could a boy his size possibly do? He saw the sweat already beading on the men's foreheads, the strain in their movements as they wrestled with obstinate stones. His gaze fell upon a stack of empty tin cups near the cooking fire. A thought sparked. He darted towards the well, his small legs pumping. The bucket, heavy even when empty, scraped against the stone lip as he lowered it. He hauled it back up, his muscles burning, the water sloshing precariously. Filling the cups, he carried them two at a time, his arms aching to where the men toiled. Big Guo, pausing to wipe his brow, took a long draught. "Ah, bless your heart, little one. This is just what the doctor ordered." Mr. Chen, catching Leo's eye, offered a gentle smile. "That's a thoughtful thing to do, Leo. Every little bit helps." The simple acknowledgement, the warmth in their voices, unfurled something tight within Leo. He wasn't just a burden, a mouth to feed. He was contributing. He spent the rest of the morning a blur of motion, fetching water, collecting stray tools, his quiet dedication noticed by everyone. The rhythmic scrape of shovels, the grunts of effort, the occasional shout of encouragement, it all wove into a symphony of purpose. As the sun climbed higher, illuminating the cleared section of track, a shared sense of accomplishment settled over the camp, a testament to their unwavering spirit. The morning air, sharp and invigorating, nipped at Leo's cheeks as he trailed Mr. Chen along the tracks. The recent near derailment, an incident narrowly averted by sheer fortune and quick reflexes, had left the camp humming with a heightened, almost nervous, vigilance. Yet Mr. Chen moved with an unhurried grace, a seasoned mentor guiding a greenhorn. In his hand he carried a long, slender steel hammer, its head burnished to a sheen by years of diligent use. "See here, Leo." "Mister," Chen instructed, tapping a rail joint with practiced exactitude. The hammer rang out, a clear, resonant ding. "That's the sound of solid steel. No fissures, no inherent weakness. It sings." He advanced a few paces, striking again. This time the sound was muted, a flat thud. "And that," he explained, his voice hushed, "that's trouble. A hairline fracture, perhaps, hidden from sight. The metal whispers its agony." Leo, typically reserved and retiring, found himself utterly engrossed. He watched, spellbound. As Mr. Chen patrolled the rails, his ears finely tuned to every minute variation in pitch. It was a lexicon Leo had never imagined, a clandestine dialogue between man and metal. When Mr. Chen extended the hammer to him, its substantial weight conveyed a sense of earnest purpose. Leo tapped tentatively, eliciting a series of hesitant clinks. "Don't shy away from striking it true," Mr. Chen encouraged, a gentle smile creasing his weathered face. "The rail has narratives to unfold. You simply need to heed them." Later, sharing steaming bowls of noodles beside the roaring forge, Mr. Chen recounted tales of bygone eras. Storms that had devoured sections of track, blizzards that had interred them for weeks. It was never a solitary individual who mended things, he mused, stirring his noodles thoughtfully. It was the collective spirit of the camp. Every pair of hands, every sturdy back. We'd unite, a human bulwark against the unforgiving wilderness. One person alone, they're just a whisper in the wind. But united, we shift mountains. Big Guo, ever the boisterous one, interjected. "Remember that 98 deluge, Mr. Chen?" We genuinely believed the river had devoured half the line, but we resurrected it, swifter and more robust. He clapped Leo heartily on the shoulder, a friendly thump that nearly dislodged Leo from his stool. "And you, young man, you're now part of that. Another vital link in the chain." A warmth, distinct from the forge's heat, spread through Leo. He had always been an observer, a shadow flitting at the periphery. But here, amidst the rhythmic clang of hammers and the camaraderie of shared meals, he was no longer an outsider. He was deciphering their idiom, not just the percussive language of the rails, but the unspoken bond of a team. He was no longer merely watching. He was being initiated. He was being embraced. The camp wasn't just a haven. It was evolving into home, and these men, his newfound kin. A palpable current coursed through the camp that morning, a deep thrum beneath the usual breakfast clatter. The very air felt charged, vibrating with an energy that drew every soul toward the track's edge. Today was the day. The final length of rail lay waiting, dull gleam muted by the morning sun, a metallic promise stretching toward the horizon. Men moved with an almost ritualistic grace, inspecting bolts, aligning timbers, their eyes wide with a blend of reverence and raw excitement. Leo, typically a quiet observer, found himself pulled into the vortex of activity. Big Guo, his face streaked with sweat and grime from an early start, clapped him on the shoulder. "Come on, little brother. Wouldn't want to miss history in the making now, would we?" He flashed a wide, infectious grin that propelled Leo forward. Mr. Chen, meticulously overseeing the final measurements, looked up and offered a rare, radiant smile. "Almost there, Leo. Almost home." The moment arrived with a collective hush. The last rail was hoisted into place, a symphony of grunts and groans from the men, followed by a breathless silence as it settled. A single, polished spike, an emblem of their shared odyssey, was handed to Mr. Chen. He drew a deep breath, his usually steady hands betraying a slight tremor. Then, with the swing honed by years of arduous labor, he struck. Clang! The sound resonated, a triumphant bell tolling the conclusion of an epic undertaking. The crowd erupted. Cheers, shouts, whistles, and the joyful clang of pots and pans from Auntie Mei's kitchen coalesced into a victorious cacophony. Men embraced, slapped backs, some even wept openly, their faces etched with a decade of toil and sacrifice. Leo watched, a strange warmth unfurling in his chest. He saw Big Guo hoisting Auntie Mei onto his shoulders, her booming laugh echoing above the din. He saw Mr. Chen, tears carving clean rivulets through the dust on his cheeks, clasping hands with every man in sight. And then he felt it. A single, warm tear, escaping to trace a path down his own grimy face. It wasn't sorrow, but something profound and unexpected. It was the taste of belonging, of shared victory, of being a vital thread in a monumental tapestry. He was no longer merely an orphan, a boy taken in. He was one of them, woven into the very fabric of this resilient, boisterous family. He had hammered his own silent spikes into this track, into this life, and it felt like coming home. The rhythmic clang of forks on tin, the lilt of Cantonese, and the rich perfume of ginger and soy. This symphony, Leo now realized, was once a mere figment of his imagination. Auntie Mei glided around the bustling communal table, her movements a study in efficiency, replenishing rice bowls with an almost telepathic precision. Across from him, Big Guo, his features perpetually smudged with coal dust, was mid-yarn about a runaway handcar, his booming laughter reverberating through the wooden shack. Mr. Chen, a subtle smile playing on his lips, offered only nods, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he absorbed the boisterous scene. Here, Leo, once a silent specter, had found his voice. He still preferred to observe, to steep himself in the rhythms of this nascent existence, yet the cloak of invisibility had lifted. He'd arrived a terrified, hollow-eyed waif, a mere ghost flitting along the tracks. Now, he was an integral pulse, a vital cog in the living, breathing machinery of the Chen family. He recalled his inaugural meal, a humble bowl of congee imbued with a forgotten warmth. Mr. Chen had presented it with a gentle hand, offering no inquiries, just an unspoken understanding. Auntie Mei had hovered, a worried crease between her brows, until he consumed every last grain. It was then, he mused, that the initial tendrils of belonging had taken root in his small, scarred heart. The days stretched long, marked by the insistent ring of hammers, the sigh of steam, and the earthy aroma of newly turned soil. Leo, no longer a mere bystander, had carved out his niche. He fetched water, sorted spikes, and learned the names of tools he'd never conceived. Big Guo, beneath his bluster, proved surprisingly patient, instructing him in the proper method for tamping ballast, his large hands guiding Leo's smaller ones. "Strength isn't solely in your arms, boy," he'd rumbled one afternoon, wiping sweat from his brow. "It's in your grit." Evenings brought narratives by the flickering oil lamp, tales of their distant homeland, of arduous journeys, and of the iron leviathan they were painstakingly weaving across the continent. Leo would draw close to Mr. Chen, sometimes leaning against his unyielding leg, listening as the older man spoke of the future, of cities linked, of families reunited. They weren't just laying tracks, Leo understood, but forging pathways to dreams. One evening, as the first stars pricked the inky dome above, Leo surveyed the camp. Cook fires glowed like scattered embers. The silhouettes of men moved with purpose, and the distant wail of a locomotive, a sound that once invoked only dread, now held a distinct promise. He had no kin by blood, not anymore, but he had this. He had Mr. Chen's quiet sagacity, Auntie Mei's steadfast devotion, and Big Guo's infectious buoyancy. He had a family sculpted not from lineage, but from steel, sweat, and shared aspirations. He was finally home, and for the first time in an age, Leo gazed toward the future, not with apprehension, but with a tranquil, certain joy, knowing he was precisely where he belonged, helping to lay the foundation for a new tomorrow, one rail at a time.